Welcome to the Curious Culture Club, where we delve into the depths of humanity's most chilling tales. Today we introduce you to Luis Alfredo Garavito, infamously known as La Bestia, a man whose actions have left an indelible mark of terror and sorrow on society. His name, synonymous with unspeakable atrocities, paints a grim portrait of the darkest corners of human capability. The story of the Beast is a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk among us. Garavito, a name that sends chills down the spine, is a dark chapter in human history. To understand the Beast, we must first explore the man behind it, Luis Alfredo Garavito. Born in Colombia, Garavito endured a childhood riddled with abuse and hardship. Raised in poverty, he was one of 7 children, often bearing the brunt of his father's violent, drunken outbursts. His mother was absent, leaving young Luis vulnerable and devoid of any parental affection or guidance. Garavito's adolescence was no different, marked by homelessness and desperation. He was forced into menial labor to survive, further isolating him from any semblance of a normal childhood. Such an upbringing, devoid of love and filled with violence, may have laid the groundwork for the monster he would become. As Garavito matured, his life didn't improve. He was continuously rejected by society and turned to alcohol as a means to cope, a trait he perhaps inherited from his father. This perpetual state of despair and disillusionment with society could have been a contributing factor to his later heinous crimes. Garavito's story is not one of justification, but rather one of understanding. His actions are inexcusable, but his troubled past offers a glimpse into the possible origins of the beast within him. The hardship and abuse Garavito experienced may have twisted his perception of right and wrong, ultimately leading to his horrifying killing spree. Garavito's troubled past could have been a breeding ground for the beast within him. The name La Bestia was not given lightly. Garavito's methods were as horrifying as they were meticulous. Luis Alfredo Garavito, dubbed La Bestia or the Beast, was a predator of the most chilling kind. His victims, tragically, were always the most vulnerable, destitute children, many of whom were orphans or street dwellers. Garavito would use disguises to gain their trust, often posing as a street vendor, monk, or a charity worker. He would lure them with small tokens like sweets or coins and promises of work. Once he had their trust, he would lead them away, often on long walks that would tire them out. Once isolated and vulnerable, he would commit his unspeakable acts. The patterns in his approach were chillingly consistent. He targeted boys aged between 6 and 16, always from low-income backgrounds, always those who wouldn't be missed immediately. This was a man who knew how to exploit societal blind spots for his horrifying ends. Estimating the exact number of his victims is a daunting task, given the sheer geographical scope of his crimes. From the bustling streets of Bogotá to the remote villages in the Colombian countryside, the Beast was not confined by borders. His crimes stretched across at least 6 provinces, making it a nightmare for investigators to track his movements and link the cases. The magnitude of his crimes was such that it posed an unprecedented challenge for law enforcement. Garavito's killing spree was not just an act of violence, but a complex web of deception and manipulation that spanned across years and miles. The sheer scale of it, the calculated brutality, and the heart-wrenching number of victims painted a grim picture that investigators had to piece together. Compounding the difficulties was the fact that many of his victims were unreported missing due to their social status, making it even harder to quantify the true extent of his atrocities. Garavito's killing spree was a dark puzzle that investigators scrambled to put together, a puzzle that would eventually lead them to the monster behind it, revealing a harsh truth that would shake the nation to its core. Garavito's reign of terror came to an end, but the aftermath of his actions left deep scars on the community. His trial was a spectacle that gripped the nation. Garavito was charged with hundreds of counts of murder, torture, and other heinous crimes. The courtrooms were packed to the brim, and the nation watched in silent horror as the details of his killing spree were laid bare. His sentence? Just over 1,800 years in prison, a symbolic gesture, given that the maximum sentence in Colombia is 40 years. The aftermath of the trial was a time of reflection for the community. Mourning the loss of so many innocent lives, there was a collective call for justice and change. The case sparked national discussions about child safety, leading to stricter laws and increased public awareness. The face of La Bestia, once hidden, was now a sobering reminder of the evil that can exist within our midst. To understand Garavito's mindset is to delve into a dark abyss. Psychologists who have studied his case suggest a complex interplay of factors that may have contributed to his violent behavior. A troubled childhood, a lack of empathy, and a perverse need for power and control were among the potential influences. But these factors don't excuse his actions, they only help us understand the why behind the what. The societal impact of Garavito's killing spree was profound. It shook the nation to its core and prompted changes in law enforcement procedures. Investigators are now more vigilant, more attuned to patterns that might indicate a serial offender. Awareness campaigns have been ramped up, and communities have banded together to protect their most vulnerable members. Garavito's case remains a haunting reminder of the monsters that can lurk among us and the lessons we must learn to prevent such tragedies. His story is one of horror and desolation, but it's also a story of resilience, of a community that rose from the ashes to demand justice, and of a society that refuses to forget.